It was just a simple portrait of friendship, until restorers found the letter hidden in the corner. Emily Chun had been working as a photo restoration specialist in San Francisco for 8 years, but she had never seen damage quite like this. The photograph that arrived at her studio in March 2024 was severely deteriorated, water-stained, torn at the edges with large sections obscured by mold and discoloration. The client, Margaret Liu, had inherited it from her grandmother's estate. "I don't even know who these people are," Margaret had said when she dropped it off. "But my grandmother kept this photo in a locked box her entire life, separate from all the family albums. It must have meant something to her. I'd like to see what's underneath all this damage." Emily carefully positioned the photograph under her high-resolution scanner, beginning the painstaking process of digital restoration. The image showed 2 young women, probably in their early 20s, standing close together with their arms around each other's waists. Both wore high-collared white blouses and long dark skirts typical of the early 1900s. One woman was white with light brown hair pinned up elaborately. The other was Chinese, with dark hair styled similarly, her smile bright and genuine. The date stamp on the photographer's mark was partially visible. 1903, San Francisco. Emily spent hours working on the image, using specialized software to remove stains, repair tears, and enhance faded sections. As she worked on the lower right corner, one of the most damaged areas, she noticed something unusual. There was a small rectangular shape, darker than the surrounding damage, approximately 1 inch by half an inch. At first, she thought it was just another stain or piece of deterioration. But as she applied different filters and lighting adjustments, she realized it was something else entirely. It was paper. A tiny piece of paper folded multiple times and somehow adhered to the photograph itself. Camouflaged by decades of water damage and grime, Emily's pulse quickened. She had restored thousands of photographs, but she had never found anything deliberately hidden in one before. She picked up the phone to call Margaret. "I found something in your grandmother's photograph. Something that was intentionally placed there. Can you come to the studio?" Margaret arrived within an hour, her curiosity evident. Emily showed her the enhanced digital image, pointing to the small rectangular shape in the corner. "What is it?" Margaret asked. "I think it's a letter." "A very small one, folded and sealed into the photograph itself. But I can't remove it without potentially damaging both the photo and whatever is written on the paper. We need to bring in a conservator." Margaret stared at the image, at the 2 smiling women with their arms around each other. "My grandmother was Chinese," she said quietly. "She came to America as a child in the 1890s, but she never talked about her early life here. She always said it was too painful to remember." Emily looked at the Chinese woman in the photograph, at her joyful expression. "I think we're about to find out why, Doctor." James Morrison, a paper conservator from the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, arrived at Emily's studio 3 days later. He examined the photograph under magnification, his expression growing more intrigued with each passing minute. "This is extraordinary," he said. The paper was sealed to the photograph using what appears to be rice paste, a traditional adhesive. Whoever did this wanted it to stay hidden, but also wanted it to survive. The placement in the corner, the type of adhesive used, this was deliberate preservation. "Can you remove it without damaging either the photo or the letter?" Emily asked. "I believe so, but it will take time and extreme care." Over the next 2 hours, Emily and Margaret watched as James worked with tools so delicate they seemed like surgical instruments. He carefully applied a solution that softened the century-old adhesive, then slowly, millimeter by millimeter, separated the tiny folded paper from the photograph. When it was finally free, James placed it on a clean white surface. The paper was yellowed and fragile, folded into a square no bigger than a postage stamp. "The folding pattern is very specific," James observed. "This is an origami technique, Japanese influence, but adapted. Each fold would have been deliberate, designed to make the letter as small as possible while still protecting what was written inside. Using microforceps and working under magnification, James began to unfold the letter. Each crease had to be softened carefully to prevent the paper from cracking. Margaret gripped Emily's hand, both women barely breathing as they watched. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the letter lay flat. It measured approximately 2 inches by 3 inches, covered in tiny, meticulously written script in English. James photographed it immediately, then projected the image onto a large monitor so they could read it. The handwriting was elegant despite its microscopic size. The letter was dated October 15th, 1903, and began, "My dearest Catherine." Emily looked at Margaret. "Do you know anyone named Catherine in your family history?" Margaret shook her head, transfixed by the screen. They continued reading together, and with each line, the heartbreak became more evident. "By the time you read this, if you ever do, I will be gone. Not dead, but gone from San Francisco, from America, from your life. The new immigration laws mean I must leave, and there is nothing either of us can do to stop it." Emily spent that evening researching the Chinese Exclusion Act and its amendments. What she learned filled her with anger and sadness. The Chinese Exclusion Act, passed in 1882, had been the first federal law to explicitly ban immigration based on nationality. It prohibited Chinese laborers from entering the United States and prevented Chinese immigrants already in the country from becoming citizens. Over the following decades, the restrictions had grown more severe. In 1902, Congress had extended the Exclusion Act indefinitely and expanded it to include Chinese people from all countries, not just China. The Geary Act of 1892 had required all Chinese residents to carry certificates of residence, and anyone found without proper documentation could be deported immediately. For Chinese women, the situation was even more dire. The Page Act of 1875 had effectively banned Chinese women from immigrating, based on racist assumptions that they were prostitutes. Chinese families were systematically separated, with men unable to bring wives or daughters to America. Emily called Margaret. "I think I understand what happened. The woman in the photo with Catherine, your ancestor, was being deported under the exclusion laws. That's why the letter talks about her being gone from America. My grandmother's name was May." Margaret said quietly, "Mei Liu. She was born in San Francisco in 1891, which would have made her about 12 in this photo. But wait, if she was born here, wouldn't she have been a citizen? Why would she be deported? That's what we need to find out." Emily contacted Dr. Lisa Wang, a historian at UC Berkeley who specialized in Chinese American history during the exclusion era. Dr. Wang agreed to meet with them the next day. In her office, surrounded by books and historical documents, Dr. Wang examined the photograph and the letter carefully. "This is remarkable," she said. "Personal correspondence from this period is incredibly rare. Most Chinese immigrants were afraid to keep written records that might be used against them." "Can you help us understand what happened to May?" Margaret asked. "Let me search the immigration records. If May was deported, there should be documentation." Dr. Wang spent 2 hours combing through digitized records from the Angel Island Immigration Station and the San Francisco Immigration Bureau. Finally, she found what she was looking for. "Here," she said, turning her monitor so they could see. "Mei Liu, born San Francisco 1891, deported October 1903, age 12. Reason for deportation: fraudulent birth certificate." Margaret gasped. "Fraudulent? What does that mean?" Dr. Wang's expression was grim. "It means someone challenged whether May was actually born in San Francisco. Under the exclusion laws, Chinese people born in the US were citizens and couldn't be deported. But immigration officials often accused Chinese families of creating false birth records. They would bring in witnesses who claimed the birth never happened, or they would find minor inconsistencies in paperwork and use that as justification for deportation. So May might have been a real citizen, but they deported her anyway. Almost certainly, this was common practice. Thousands of Chinese Americans, including children born here, were deported on trumped-up charges. It was ethnic cleansing, dressed up as immigration enforcement. Emily looked at the photograph again, at 12-year-old May's bright smile, her arm around her friend Catherine. "She was just a child." "Yes," Dr. Wang said sadly. And Catherine, whoever she was, tried to preserve their friendship in the only way she could by hiding this letter in their photograph, creating a time capsule of a bond that the government tried to erase. Finding information about Catherine proved more challenging than expected. The letter provided few clues, no last name, no family details. Only the depth of her affection for May and her anguish at their forced separation. Emily returned to the photograph itself, examining every detail. The photographer's mark in the corner, partially obscured by damage, read, "Morrison Photography Studio, 1903, San Francisco." She searched historical records and found that Morrison Photography Studio had operated on Market Street from 1895 to 1920. The studio's client ledgers had been donated to the San Francisco History Center, and Emily requested access immediately. 3 days later, she sat in the History Center's reading room, carefully turning pages of faded handwriting, recording every photograph taken in October 1903. On October 10th, she found the entry, "Portrait, 2 young ladies. Names, Miss Catherine Morrison and Miss Mei Liu. Paid in full, $2.50. Catherine Morrison." The photographer's daughter. Emily felt a surge of excitement. She searched census records and found the Morrison family. Robert Morrison, age 45, photographer. Wife Catherine, age 42. Daughter Catherine, age 20. Son William, age 18. Catherine would have been May's age, give or take a few years. They must have grown up together, perhaps meeting through Robert's photography business, which likely served the diverse communities of San Francisco. Emily found Catherine again in the 1910 census, still living with her parents, now age 27 and working as a clerk. In 1920, Catherine appeared as Catherine Morrison Reed, married to James Reed, a banker. They had one son, Robert, age 4. The trail continued through subsequent decades. Catherine lived a long life, dying in 1978 at age 95. Her obituary in the San Francisco Chronicle described her as a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother who had been active in community service and social justice causes throughout her life. But there was something else in the obituary that caught Emily's attention. Mrs. Reed was a founding member of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance and worked tirelessly for the repeal of discriminatory immigration laws. She maintained correspondence with friends around the world and was known for her remarkable collection of international letters, preserved in multiple volumes. Emily called Margaret immediately. Catherine spent her life fighting the laws that took May away from her, and the obituary mentions a letter collection. We need to find Catherine's descendants. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Emily, what if the letters include correspondence with May? What if they stayed in touch? That's exactly what I'm hoping. Emily searched genealogy databases and found Catherine's grandson, David Reed, age 73, living in Berkeley. She called him that evening, her heart racing as she explained the discovery. I know about the photograph, David said immediately. My grandmother kept it on her desk her entire life. When she died, my father found dozens of boxes in her attic, all filled with letters. He donated most of them to UC Berkeley's archives, but he kept some of the personal ones. They're in my garage. I've been meaning to go through them for years. Would you be willing to look for letters from someone named Mei Liu? Mei Liu, David repeated slowly. That name. Yes, I've seen it. There are boxes specifically labeled May Canton. My grandmother told me once that May was her best friend, that they'd been separated when they were young, but never stopped writing. I never understood what she meant until now. Can we see the letters? Come tomorrow. I think it's time these letters saw the light of day. David Reed's garage contained treasures beyond anything Emily had imagined. 17 boxes, carefully labeled and preserved, containing hundreds of letters exchanged between Catherine Morrison Reed and Mei Liu from 1904 to 1954, 50 years of friendship maintained across an ocean and through 2 world wars, economic depression, and profound personal changes. David carried the boxes into his living room, where Emily, Margaret, and Dr. Wang waited. My grandmother was meticulous, he explained. She kept every letter May sent, organized by year, and apparently May did the same when my grandmother died. We found that she'd requested copies of her own letters to be returned from May's family after May passed away in 1954. They opened the first box, labeled 1904 to 1910. Inside were letters written on thin paper, some in English, some in Chinese, all carefully preserved in individual protective sleeves. The earliest letter was dated January 15th, 1904, just 3 months after May's deportation. It was written in Chinese and Dr. Wang translated. My dearest Catherine, I have arrived in Canton after a voyage of 37 days. I'm staying with my father's family, people I have never met before who speak a dialect I barely understand. Everything here is strange and frightening. I am supposed to be Chinese, but I feel entirely American. I miss San Francisco. I miss my mother. She was not allowed to leave with me. She is still there alone, working to survive. Most of all, I miss you. Please write to me. You are the only thread connecting me to the life I was torn from. Your devoted friend, May. Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. She was 12 years old, sent to a foreign country alone. Catherine's reply, dated March 1904, was equally heartbreaking. My beloved May, your letter reached me today, and I wept with relief to know you arrived safely and with sorrow for everything you have endured. I go to the pier sometimes and imagine I can see across the ocean to where you are. My father says I am foolish to grieve for someone I cannot help, but how can I not grieve when half my heart is... I have been writing to everyone I can think of, congressmen, lawyers, immigration officials, begging them to review your case, to allow you to return. They all say the same thing. The law is clear. There is nothing to be done, but I will not give up. I promise you, May, I will fight these unjust laws for as long as I live. And I will write to you every week without fail, so that you never feel alone. Your Catherine. Over the next several hours, they read through years of correspondence. The letters painted a picture of 2 young women growing up on opposite sides of the world, sharing their lives through words because they could share nothing else. May wrote about learning to navigate Chinese culture, about missing her mother desperately, about eventually attending a missionary school where she became a teacher. Catherine wrote about her work in her father's photography studio, about the suffrage movement, about meeting James Reed and her conflicted feelings about marriage when it meant she couldn't spend her life fighting to bring May home. The letters from the 1920s showed both women fully adult, married with children of their own, but the bond between them remained as strong as ever. In 1924, Catherine wrote, May, I have extraordinary news. The Immigration Act they passed this year is monstrous. It essentially bans all Asian immigration, but it has galvanized people. I have joined the Chinese American Citizens Alliance, and we are organizing to fight these laws. I know it comes too late for you, but perhaps we can prevent other families from being torn apart the way ours were. I should have told you before. I think of you as my sister, not just my friend. Sisters separated by an unjust law, but sisters nonetheless. May's response, translated by Dr. Wang, was equally emotional. Catherine, you have always been more than a friend to me. You are my sister in every way that matters. The fact that you are fighting for justice, even when I can never return, means more to me than I can express. I have a daughter now. Her name is Lynn, which means beautiful jade. I tell her about you, about the friend who would not let me be forgotten. When she is old enough, I will give her your letter so she knows that friendship can survive anything, even oceans and unjust laws. Emily looked at Margaret. Lynn would have been your grandmother. Margaret nodded, overcome with emotion. My grandmother Lynn, she died when I was 15. But I remember her talking about her mother's American friend, the woman who wrote letters that arrived like treasures. I never understood the significance until now. The letters from the 1930s and 1940s showed the strain of world events. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, Catherine wrote frantically, terrified for May's safety as Japanese forces invaded Canton. May's letters from that period were sparse, sometimes taking months to arrive, but they showed remarkable resilience. In 1943, Catherine sent a triumphant letter, May. The Exclusion Act has been repealed. After 61 years, Chinese immigration is finally legal again. It's not perfect. They're only allowing 105 Chinese immigrants per year, which is absurdly small, but it's a start. I immediately filed papers to bring you back to America. But they say that because you were deported, you're not eligible. I'm fighting this. Hiring lawyers, writing to everyone. We are both old women now. I am 60. You are 52, but I haven't given up hope that we might see each other again before we die. May's response was bittersweet. My dear Catherine, your efforts to bring me back touch my heart. But I think we must accept reality. I have lived in China for 40 years now. My life is here, my husband, my daughter, my grandchildren. Even if they allow me to return, I'm not sure I could leave them. But know this, you gave me something precious. You gave me proof that I was not forgotten, that I mattered, that our friendship transcended every barrier they tried to put between us. That is worth more than any return to America could be. The last box contained letters from 1950 to 1954. Both women were in their 60s and 70s, reflecting on lives well lived but marked by the permanent separation forced upon them in 1903. Catherine's letters from this period were shorter, her handwriting shakier. She wrote about her grandchildren, about her continued work with civil rights organizations, about her aging body failing but her mind remaining sharp and focused on justice. In March 1954, May wrote what would be her final letter. My dearest Catherine, I am writing this from my bed, where I have been confined for the past 3 weeks. The doctors say my heart is failing, and I believe them. I can feel it, the slow winding down of a clock that has run its course. I am not afraid. I have lived 73 years, raised a beautiful daughter, known the love of a good man, taught hundreds of children, and maintained the most important friendship of my life despite thousands of miles and decades of separation. There's something I must tell you before I go. Do you remember the photograph we took in October 1903, just days before I was deported? I have my copy here beside me. You hid a letter in yours. I saw you do it, though you thought you were being subtle. You wanted me to be remembered, to be honored in some way, even if only in that hidden note. I want you to know, you have honored me every day for 50 years. Your letters have been my anchor, my connection to the country I still think of as home, despite living most of my life in China. You fought for justice when I could not fight for myself. You kept me alive in your heart when the government tried to erase me from existence. When I am gone, please tell your family about me. Tell them that we were friends, that we loved each other as sisters, that we refused to let hatred and injustice destroy what we built together. Tell them that friendship like ours is the antidote to every evil law, every cruel policy, every attempt to divide people based on the color of their skin or the place of their birth. I will die knowing I was loved. That is the greatest gift you gave me. Your devoted sister, May. Catherine's response was written in shaking handwriting, tear-stained and almost illegible in places. May, my heart, my sister. My beloved friend, I received your letter today, and I know what it means. I am 81 years old, and I have accepted that we will never see each other again in this life. But I promise you, I will not let our story be forgotten. I will preserve every letter, every memory, every moment of our friendship. And someday, somehow someone will find them and know what we meant to each other. You are the best person I have ever known. The government that deported you was evil, and I have spent my life fighting to change it. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 finally abolished racial restrictions on naturalization, too late for us, but perhaps not too late to matter. I love you, May. I have loved you since we were children playing together while my father took photographs. I loved you through your deportation, through 50 years of separation, through every moment of joy and sorrow in between. I will love you until I take my last breath, and if there is anything beyond this life, I will find you there. Wait for me, sister, I won't be long. Your Catherine Liu died on April 3rd, 1954. Catherine Morrison. Reed died on December 15th, 1954, just 8 months later. Some said she died of heart failure, but David Reed believed differently. My grandmother died of a broken heart, he said quietly. She lived 51 years after May was deported, but when May died, something in my grandmother just gave up. She had kept her promise, she had maintained their friendship, fought for justice, preserved every letter. But without May to write to, she didn't see the point of continuing. Emily, Margaret, and Dr. Wang prepared the story for publication. Knowing it was more than just a personal discovery, it was historical documentation of the human cost of the Chinese exclusion laws. The exhibition opened at the Chinese Historical Society of America in San Francisco in September 2024, titled Letters Across the Ocean. The 50-year friendship of Catherine and May. It featured the restored photograph with the hidden letter displayed beside it, along with selected correspondence from their decades of separation. The centerpiece was a timeline showing their lives in parallel. Catherine in San Francisco, fighting for civil rights and justice. May in Canton, building a life in exile while never forgetting the country that rejected her. The exhibition drew enormous crowds. Many visitors were Chinese Americans whose own families had been affected by the exclusion laws, grandparents deported, families separated, children born in America but denied citizenship through bureaucratic cruelty. One elderly woman spent nearly an hour standing in front of the photograph, tears streaming down her face. When Emily approached to check if she was okay, the woman said, "My grandmother was deported in 1905 just like May. She was 10 years old, sent back to a village in Guangdong where she'd never been. But unlike May, she had no Catherine. She had no one who remembered her, no one who fought for her, no one who wrote letters proving she mattered. She died alone in 1932, still hoping America would let her come home." Thank you for telling this story. Thank you for showing that some people cared. The story was covered by national media. NPR featured it on All Things Considered, interviewing Margaret and David about their grandmother's friendship. The New York Times ran a feature article titled, "The Letter Hidden in a Photograph: How Two Friends Defied the Chinese Exclusion Act." The photograph went viral, shared millions of times on social media. People around the world responded to the image of two young women, arms around each other, smiling at the camera just days before they would be separated forever, and to the knowledge that they had refused to let that separation destroy their bond. Several historians contacted Dr. Wang, reporting that the exhibition had inspired them to search their own archives for similar stories. Within months, dozens of other cases emerged, Chinese Americans deported under false pretenses, families torn apart by racist laws, friendships destroyed by government policy. Catherine and May were not unique, Dr. Wang explained during a lecture at UC Berkeley. There were thousands of stories like theirs, Chinese children deported, friendships severed, families destroyed. What makes their story special is that it was preserved. Catherine made sure of that. She knew that someday, someone would find those letters and understand what the exclusion laws really meant. Not just statistics about immigration numbers, but human beings whose lives were shattered by hatred dressed up as policy. In November 2024, Margaret Liu flew to Hong Kong to meet May's descendants. Through genealogical research, they had located May's granddaughter, Susan Chen, who still lived in the family home in Canton where May had spent most of her exiled life. David Reed accompanied Margaret on the trip, bringing with him the complete collection of letters between Catherine and May. Susan welcomed them into a small apartment filled with photographs and memories. On the wall hung a faded copy of the 1903 photograph, the same image, but without the hidden letter, a duplicate that May must have kept all those years. "My grandmother spoke about Catherine often," Susan said in fluent English. Learned from the missionary school her family had attended for generations. She would hold that photograph and tell me stories about San Francisco, about her childhood, about the friend who never forgot her. She made me promise to keep the photograph safe, to remember that she had been American once before they took that away from her. Susan brought out a wooden box, similar to the one Margaret's grandmother had kept. Inside were Catherine's letters to May, preserved in the same careful way May's letters had been preserved in America. "My grandmother wanted these to stay in the family," Susan explained. "She was afraid that if she donated them to any archive, they might be destroyed or lost. She made my mother promise, and my mother made me promise to keep them safe until someone came looking. She said, someday Catherine's family will want to know what happened to me. When they come, give them the letters. Show them that I never forgot either." Margaret and Susan sat together, looking through photographs of their grandmothers at different stages of life. May, as a young teacher in the 1920s. Catherine at a civil rights rally in the 1930s. Both women in their 60s, gray-haired and aging, but still writing to each other across the ocean. They were sisters, Susan said softly. Not by blood, but by choice. That's stronger than any law. David unpacked a box he had brought from California. Inside was a quilt, sewn by Catherine in 1935, made from scraps of fabric sent back and forth in letters over the years. Each square represented a different year of their friendship, a different memory, a different moment preserved in cloth. My grandmother made this as a way of keeping May close, David explained. She wanted something tangible, something she could touch when the letters felt too distant. Susan gasped. My grandmother made one too. Wait here. She disappeared into a back room and returned with a nearly identical quilt, made from the same exchanged fabrics, the same years represented in cloth. The two quilts, separated for 90 years, lay side by side mirror images of a friendship that had refused to die. Margaret and Susan looked at each other and simultaneously began to cry. They never got to see each other again, Margaret said. But we can honor them by being here together. Yes, Susan agreed. We can finish what they started. On October 15th, 2025, exactly 122 years after, Catherine hid her letter in the photograph. A ceremony was held at Angel Island, the former immigration station where thousands of Chinese immigrants had been detained, interrogated, and often sent back to China. The site, now a museum and historical landmark, had become a place of remembrance for the victims of the Chinese exclusion laws. Margaret and Susan had worked with the museum to create a permanent installation honoring Catherine and May's friendship. The centerpiece was a large reproduction of the 1903 photograph, with the hidden letter displayed beside it in translation. Around the room, selected letters from their 50-year correspondence lined the walls, showing the evolution of their friendship from childhood playmates to separated friends to elderly women reflecting on a lifetime of devotion. But the most powerful element was an interactive digital display allowing visitors to read all of the letters, organized chronologically. Museum goers could follow Catherine and May's lives year by year, reading their hopes, fears, joys, and sorrows in their own words. At the ceremony, Margaret spoke first. My grandmother May was torn from her home at age 12, sent to a country she didn't know, separated from her mother and her best friend. The government that did this to her called it immigration enforcement. But we know what it really was: ethnic cleansing, racial hatred, systematic cruelty. May survived because of Catherine, because one person refused to forget her, refused to accept that a law made their friendship illegal, refused to let injustice have the final word. Susan spoke next, reading from a letter. May had written in 1948, Catherine asked me once if I was angry at America for what happened to me. I told her, I am not angry at America. I am angry at the people who claim to speak for America while betraying everything it promised. America is supposed to be a place where all people are created equal, where friendship and love matter more than the color of your skin or the shape of your eyes. Catherine showed me that America, the real America, through 50 years of letters, 50 years of loyalty, 50 years of love that no law could touch. David spoke last. My grandmother. Catherine spent her entire adult life fighting the laws that took May away from her. She was there when the Exclusion Act was finally repealed in 1943. She was there when the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 abolished racial restrictions on naturalization. She didn't live to see the Immigration Act of 1965, which finally ended discriminatory quotas, but her work helped make it possible. She fought not because she thought May could come back. She knew that was impossible, but because she couldn't stand the thought of other children being torn away from their friends, their families, their homes. The ceremony concluded with both families placing flowers at a memorial plaque that read, In memory of Mai Liu, 1891 to 1954, and Catherine Morrison, Reed, 1883 to 1978, whose friendship transcended distance, injustice, and time. May we never forget what was done to them, and may we never repeat it. As the crowd dispersed, Margaret and Susan stood together, looking out at San Francisco Bay, the same water that had separated their grandmothers for 51 years. They would be happy to know we found each other, Susan said. Yes, Margaret agreed. They would be proud that we're telling their story, that we're not letting them be forgotten. Do you think they knew? Susan asked. Do you think they understood that their letters would matter to people more than a century later? Margaret thought about the tiny letter hidden in the corner of the photograph, about Catherine's determination to preserve it, about May's insistence that the letters be kept safe. I think they knew. I think they hoped, and I think they trusted that someday someone would find what they left behind and understand what it meant. The sun set over the bay, golden light reflecting off the water. Somewhere across that ocean in Canton, another sunset was beginning, just as it had every day for 122 years, connecting two cities, two families, two women whose friendship had proven stronger than hatred. Catherine and May were gone, but their legacy remained in letters carefully preserved, in a photograph with a hidden promise, in two families united across continents and cultures, in a story that reminded everyone who heard it that love and loyalty can survive anything, even the cruelest laws, even the widest oceans, even time itself.